I am here somewhere, I promise. Oh, there I am. Okay, good. Lost me for a minute. Hey, week one, learn together. So, this concept that you're about to do is taking what you're already seeing in Andrew's course and giving you more experience of coming up. Now, actually, in his case, he's giving you the requirements. He's saying, do this and do this and do this. So, in my example, what I'm going to say is, I want you to accomplish something. You come up with the concept. Okay. Here are the things I want to see in your code. Now, write some code that does that. And then, what I will do in my example, I will actually show you my code. Now, I don't always do this. Through the course, you'll see times where I don't always provide you my example in the overview, because the idea, and I want you to get used to this, is that you look at my video as you're doing now and you write your own code. Now, this is a really important concept. I've taught this a couple of times, and I often have one student or maybe two that has a real tendency to go out to the web and find some code, because there is a lot of code out on the web. But using somebody else's code is often appropriate, but for learning, it's not. But you want to be able to read code, absolutely, and understand what that code's doing. But ultimately, what you want to walk away with is the ability to write code yourself. Okay? So in this part of our course, the idea is that we're going to build on what you started with the code along. So in the code along, you got introduced to concepts, you actually got some coding experience, some of that muscle memory, and now we're going to see how well that translated for you by giving you something to code requirements wise. Okay, so let me just move to that rather than talk about it, because sometimes it's like, oh, what is it I need to do? So let's jump in. So here we are let me just get rid of you for a minute, or get rid of me for a minute. So in this case, I'm under week one and we're in the learn together. So what I want you to do is, I want you to, given what we've learned, right? So we've learned variables, booleans, comparisons, if else, variable scope. Now, these are higher level summary and concepts, of which there were many different examples and ways to write it. But I want you to extend your knowledge of these topics by consider a decision you make on daily or very often, maybe, and write code that represents your decision in JavaScript, right? So if I'm making a decision, I'm probably definitely going to have, I have to use an if. So if this condition is true, or if it's false, or if it's greater than or equal to, or greater than, or any of the comparisons, right? If this is true, then do this. Else, if this is true, do this. And then understanding how to set variables, where its scope means having it on the global scope, understanding that there's a difference between global scope and local scope, local to a block, a code block, and a if. These are really important concepts. And so giving some time to learn them is important. And I'm just going to say this, it is often a little, it can be. Like, I was a little surprised. I had a couple ideas I was going to use for my code example, but I gave myself a little time to think about it. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to do this because it actually is something I do on a daily basis. So just before I jump into my code and take a look, do know, and I'll show you this, is that you want to create this in your public repo in a folder called W1. And the way I grade this is, did you use 90% of what we've learned? Now, these are major concepts, so you didn't use all the variations. So 90% of just what we learned in this section. And here's the key, is, did you write your own code? Now, this is something that in the beginning can be a little harder, because our code tends to look a little the same, but over time, I really get to know you, and I get to know your coding style, and it's not fairly easy, but I generally can tell with some effort if a student has written their own code. And remember, the idea here is for you to do that. So 85% of your points comes from that. 15% of your points comes from writing something in your reply. Okay. You're going to provide a link. I'm going to provide a secondary video I've already talked about here for how to do that link. and actually shown you a way to output to the browser. That's not required this week. I do think it's a good suggestion to go ahead and look at. And then your 2 replies is also wrapped up in this 15 points. I do accept late work. Instead of 100 points possible, it goes down to 75, and therefore these will change. And if you want more detail about that, just let me know. Okay. So if you're not, just let me say this, if you're not doing the output to page, then what you could do here, let's say here is in your week 1, the file I'm about to show you. You could just provide this link, copy it. Okay. And in your reply, then you would, let's see, no, let's go back down here, right? You could just paste that in. Right. And then you would write something about it. And by the way, you also notice though, as soon as I hit enter, it actually did link that. So make sure that is a hyperlink. I have covered this, but here we go. It is a ref, right? And so make sure if you're either writing that code, either way, if it for your browser, if it automatically puts that on there, great. And then you'll do a little writing about your experience. And then you'll do 2 replies to get full points. Okay, so let me move you over to my example. So what I did here is in my W1, I created a file called daily.js. And then in here I put, right, so one of my most common things I do is figure out what I can get done before heading to the gym for my workout. Now, in my gym, they actually run classes. So I actually have a class time that I'm at the gym, if you see this. So what I've done here is I've set up some global variables. So I've said let current time, and this is camel casing. I believe he's talked about it, but if not, it's really great to name variables what they're actually going to represent so that when somebody's reading your code, they get a good idea what that means. Now, in this case, I'm not actually using what is commonly called the date and time object. We'll talk about that later, but I'm just setting this as a number. So I'm saying current time equal to 7.5, and let's just move it to 7. I'll show you why in a minute. Gym class start time is 8 o'clock. So if my current time, meaning when I get up, and I could change that to say when I awaken, that'd be fine. And then I decided to do a calculation. So another variable on the global scope, say time before gym, is equal to whatever the start time of the class minus the current time. Now, this is just going to give me integer values, which is fine. It totally works for my logic. And then I would say my turn to drive because I don't know. I work out with a friend. She drives, I drive. We figure that out. But I decided that instead of doing a little more complicated logic on the if, just for my first example, because here is really what happens is you write code and then you rewrite code and then you rewrite code some more because you figure out better ways to do it. So I said, if my turn to drive, then time before gym is going to be equal to whatever that time before gym that was calculated minus 0.3, because that's about in the calculation of time that I'm using, it would take me to drive her, drop her off on the way back. And then I set another variable on the global space called message, and then I use console log just to output morning task. And I could do some more, and again, if you want to watch, and I recommend watching the video where I show you how to output it to a browser, that's great too. I output make coffee, get morning sun, meditate, make green drink, and then I have a message. Now, in this case, I've declared the message out on global space, but inside of my block, I'm updating that message. Remember that only one of these branches of logic is going to run. And so whichever one runs then updates this message that I will output down here. So in my example, I'm using only global scope, but I'm actually updating it from within the local because I'm not, and remember, if I had said let here, that would have been different, right? That wouldn't have worked for my particular code. So I said, if time before gym greater than 1.5, right, then I can do all my things. Else, if it's less than 0.75, I can only do these things. Else, if it's somewhere not greater than or not less than, right, then I can do these things. And then I also change the message for each different condition, and then that outputs here. So that when I want to run this, and I'll just go ahead and I'll put it to here. I'll type node, and then I'll type daily. And so you can see based on my numbers here, which branch ran. Morning task, make coffee and meditate. So we can see that, yeah, indeed, that was true. I had less than, because if I took these, and then again, it also hit the condition of that it was true. So it changed my time before gym. So I hope that helps you, at least give you an example. I will remind you of something really important here. Okay, let me bring myself back. There I am. um, do give yourself some time to think about an actual making something as real world as possible makes it more fun to work on. Okay, and so where possible, do that, right? Make it something. And the reason I ended up with this one is I do it every day. It's like, okay, how much time do I have? What can I accomplish before I head to the gym in the morning? And therefore, right, what kind of message would I want to give myself if I was programming an assistant for my house to help me with that? And of course, programs are apps that we use are very sophisticated often. So this may seem, well, it is simple. That's the idea. Honestly, the idea here is we do keep these simple. Okay. All right. So again, I hope this gives you an overview of what you need to do. Do check out the second video if you want to go ahead and get some experience of how to output that to page. I will just show you, if you want me to, that I did also convert this. So if I was to, and if you want to know more about this process of live server, right? So this would be that same console.log, but in this case, instead of outputting to the console, I'm actually outputting to the page. So that's my encouragement for you to check out the second video. That, again, you don't have to do it this week, but you will need to do it by next. So the sooner the better. It's really, and here's how I would gauge this. Do this if you were able to kind of get through this and you're like, yeah, I got this, I understand these concepts, I can do this. So maybe then move on to outputting it to the page. If not, you'll include that in the work that you do next week. All right. Peace out. Have a good one.